Good Thursday evening to everybody out there. Meteorologist Zach Fidel here with you. And boy, do we have a lot to talk about. Just first up is obviously whenever you have the potential to be impacted by a hurricane, whether it's a hurricane or a tropical storm, there's always a lot to talk about. There's always many variables, especially days in advance, that are going to play and factor into the final result. And, that's where we stand. We're finally getting a grasp on the track for Nate. And, the track is not going to change much from here. There is going to be small deviations, and those small deviations can make big, significant changes for who sees the worst weather and who gets off with really not much. And I say it all the time, and we say it as meteorologists, if you're in the cone, you should be making preparations now to protect your life, to protect your property. You should be preparing for not only a Category 1 hurricane, but more so a Category 2 hurricane. We always say, prepare for one category higher, and that's what we always say because we have very little skill in forecasting intensity, and I'm going to go over that over the next few minutes that I'm talking to you. Let's look at the big satellite picture because right now there's absolutely nothing to show you on this. You see this mass of moisture that stretches all the way from the Pacific Ocean across Central America all the way up through the Florida. Where's the center of Nate? Well, it's somewhere right along the Honduras coastline. And it's continuing to march off to the north-northwest. It is going to be back over water probably by about midnight tonight. That is when we start to see what is this going to become. We can't judge things right now. I don't fault many people that say, well, look at it now. It's nothing. Let's see. Well, they said the same thing with Harvey. And no, this is not going to become a Harvey. No, this is not going to stall like Harvey and dump tons of rain. But when we're seeing these forecasts come out and we're seeing these models and different things, and we see a favorable environment like we see ahead of this storm, it worries us. As meteorologists, it worries us because we know that people are not going to take this seriously until we get to the point where we see it. And that may not be until later tomorrow. And then at that point, you're within 24 hours of a landfall somewhere along the Louisiana coastline. Let's get into the specifics of why, this is all probably going to play out the way it is and why, is the environment favorable? That's the big kicker right here. Is this environment favorable for strengthening of a tropical system? This is the water vapor imagery. This is where we look for wind shear. This is in the upper levels. Remember, hurricanes like no wind up in the upper levels. They like zero wind. They want the wind to be at the ground, going into the center, and then up and out, and no wind up there. Right now, there is strong southwesterly shear across the northwest Caribbean. You see it. It's all because of this huge upper low. And then there's a lot of dry air. Look at all this dry air right here, okay? If the atmosphere was not a fluid, and the atmosphere didn't always move, which it's always in motion, you see this in motion right now, then we would say, hey, this thing has to cross that path of that upper low. It's not going to do anything. It's going to weaken. Well, that's not the case. The atmosphere is a fluid, and just because the center is going to move this direction, well, guess what? This guy, this upper low right here, is going to move too, and it's going to move this way. You can clearly see what it's doing already. That's going to pull all of this moisture in front of Nate, so here goes our dry air that could kill off the storm. So we're going to get more moisture in front of Nate. And then the wind shear, what's going to happen is as the upper low dives south into the, say, southwest, it's more like southwest Gulf of Mexico, Bay of Campeche, the winds, say the strong winds are going to turn more like this. And that's actually going to provide an outflow jet. So as the storm gets here, whatever happens on one side, upper level low over here, high pressure here, a high pressure in the upper levels is what hurricanes love. And that is what we're worried about is this thing's going to position itself as this upper low starts to scoot away, from the storm and dives into Mexico. That's going to provide a perfect upper level environment for the storm to strengthen somewhere over the Northwest Caribbean and then again over the Gulf of Mexico. If this would just park itself right there, guess what? We would have nothing to worry about, but that is unfortunately not going to be the case. Let me show you the latest models because, like I said, the track with Nate is becoming more confident. We're becoming very confident that the storm is going to make landfall across Southeast Louisiana, somewhere from, say, Morgan City to possibly as far east as the Mississippi Gulf Coast. But if it hits the Mississippi Gulf Coast, it's probably going to cross Plaquemines Parish first. But you see how the models are just in very good agreement now. They're not perfect. They stretch from the Mississippi-Alabama border. You can ignore the one in Southwest Louisiana. I know I have a lot of people that watch from Southwest Louisiana. there's really nothing right now that tells me this can get that far west. I think you will have very little to no impact whatsoever if you're in Southwest Louisiana. But from about Lafayette to the Mississippi-Alabama border, we keep shrinking that area, and it's only going to get smaller. Right now, the bullseye, unfortunately, is Southeast Louisiana, somewhere between, Grand Isle, over towards the mouth of the river, and unfortunately, when the storm moves inland, that is a direct hit on the New Orleans metropolitan area. Let's get right to the track from the National Hurricane Center. This is the latest track. This is as of 4 p.m. We're going to get another one at 10. They come out 10-4, 10-4. That's what you got to remember as far as these tracks go. But clearly, nothing really has changed. They've scooted a little bit west, and this is where I'm going to get a little bit more into the specifics behind how this all may play out. Over the next 12 to 24 hours, the system is going to cross the Northwest Caribbean. How quickly does it develop is one key factor in this big scheme of things. The National Hurricane Center brings it up to a 50 miles per hour storm right here. If it gets over this later tonight, overnight hours, it's over the Northwest Caribbean, and we start to see a big blow up of convection, and we start to see this thing start to really organize, then that means, well, down the road, it could be stronger. Yes, it could clip the northeastern corner of the Yucatan, but remember, this is flat land. This is not mountainous terrain like it is down in Honduras and Nicaragua. This is just flat. And there's water on every side, so it's really not going to weaken it much. But let's get farther north. Once it gets into the Gulf, it becomes a 65 miles per hour tropical storm, and then as we go into Saturday afternoon, 2 p.m., an 80 miles per hour hurricane. The National Hurricane Center points out at this point that this could be stronger between this point here and the coastline, which, it looks like somewhere around 8 o'clock in the morning. It'll be somewhere around the coastline, right when the pre-dawn hours in the morning. That's when we're expecting a landfall. They're saying that somewhere in this, it can easily strengthen more. Okay? There are a lot of reasons I could tell you that this thing might not strengthen at all. It might stay a tropical storm. But for every reason that there's that I could tell you it might stay a tropical storm, there's another reason that says, hey, the conditions are favorable. We've seen this before. These storms can rapidly strengthen. When the conditions are favorable, rarely do they just go up a little bit. They don't strengthen a little bit. Sometimes they rapidly intensify. You've heard that a lot this year with Harvey, with Irma, really with every storm. Maria, all of those storms, they rapidly intensified. And no, am I saying that's going to happen and we're going to have a major hurricane on our hands? No, but that's why we say as meteorologists, we have very little skill in forecasting. We admit it. The track we can eventually pin down a few days out, but the intensity forecast, we struggle to make a 12 to 24 hour intensity forecast. Better yet, 3 days like we're dealing with here. Kind of getting a little bit of specifics because I know a lot of people watch from Southeast Louisiana and want to know, okay, well, where this thing goes in, what's going to be the impacts? Well, if it takes this track, this is the worst case scenario for the eastern corner of the state. If it takes this track, Baton Rouge, probably not much. There will be some wind, there will be some rain, but once you get from a line down straight south from Baton Rouge, remember the west side of the storm's probably not going to see much in the way of major impacts. It's all going to be on the eastern side. So if it takes this track right across Southeast Louisiana, it comes into Terrebonne Parish and then up the west side of the lake, this is the worst case scenario for a New Orleans, hit. You're going to get that right front quadrant of the storm, which is usually the strongest. You're going to get that surge up of Barataria Bay, Grand Isle, you're going to get all that wind over here that's blowing the water, and which it's been doing for the past multiple days. We already have high tides running along eastern facing shores. So you see how that is the worst case scenario. Now, does it take that track? Probably not. It rarely does take that track. Until you're a few hours out, it rarely does take the track. If it takes the track here, better. Still a pretty good hit for the New Orleans area, but at least better from a surge perspective. If it goes a little bit farther west, the worst of the weather, more so Baton Rouge, while New Orleans is still going to get a hard hit here, but not as bad. Again, a lot of variables in play here, but the big picture is if it follows this exact track right here as an 80 miles per hour storm, or better yet, a little bit stronger, say 90, possibly even 100. They could get to a Cat 2. We always say prepare for a category ahead or higher, Category 2, 100 miles per hour. It's going to be a very big wind damage event for the southeastern corner of the state, and also surge. The only good news with this track and any track, this storm is going to be moving fast. It is going to be in and out The conditions will be improving by Sunday afternoon, but this is going to be a fast mover. It's going to be through here very quickly, so that'll keep the rainfall totals down. Yeah, there could be still some flooding because it is a tropical system making landfall, but really the higher impacts seem to be the wind, how strong this gets. If it stays a tropical storm, great. If it becomes stronger, say a hurricane, minimal hurricane, or maybe even a little bit stronger than that, and it takes this track, we're going to see significant wind damage. Isaac, Gustav, those did not produce that. We would see worse wind damage maybe in the New Orleans metropolitan area if it takes this track. Remember, Isaac and Gustav went down here. The core sort of missed the New Orleans area. If it goes like this with Nate and it's a hurricane, it could be one of the bigger wind damage events that we've seen in recent times. Not going back to say something like Katrina. Number one, this will not be a Katrina. We're not going to see a storm surge like Katrina. That's not what we're worried about. It's more so the wind, and we are worried about some surge. Now, evacuations. I've been having people, asking me, what about evacuations? What, should I leave? Well, here's the way I feel about that. Listen to your emergency officials. That's number one. I'm a meteorologist. I don't make those decisions. I just tell you what is coming, what the weather's going to be like. But if you cannot sustain, say, normalcy with no power, then you might want to think about leaving. If you can't sustain, yourself without power, if you need power for some reason, then you probably want to maybe head off to the west a little bit. Baton Rouge might be far enough that you avoid any power outages. Farther west you go, Lake Lafayette, Lake Charles, don't go east and don't go north because the storm is going to be going north. So, if you're going to go somewhere, go west and go northwest, Alexandria or something like that to avoid power outages. But this is not going to be an evacuation storm where the New Orleans area is all going to be evacuated. We don't see that happening. We really don't have the time for that anymore because we're so close to a landfall. I mentioned it before, Southwest Louisiana. I know I have a lot of followers over there. Not really concerned about you whatsoever. Very little impacts. In fact, you might have a nice day once you get to Sunday afternoon into Monday because you'll be on the dry side of the storm. And the intensity, said it before, I'll say it again, we have very little skill in forecasting intensity. Once it gets back over water, we'll see what's there and we'll see how quickly it starts to ramp up. And then maybe by tomorrow night and Saturday morning, we'll have a better idea of how strong the storm will be when it makes landfall in Southeast Louisiana. But again, your preparation should already have begun. We should be already into the stages of preparing, getting yourself ready for the possibility of, winds to hurricane force, which are going to take down some power lines. They're going to knock down some trees. And that could also cause some, damage to your house as well. So that's what we're saying. Residents should be, quickly making those preparations. Go and get those essential food items to just sustain yourself for a few days, as we could be possibly dealing with, some power outages for a couple of days, depending on the exact track. If it takes the track the Hurricane Center is predicting right now, exact, most of Southeast Louisiana may very well lose power just because that is probably the worst track it could take. It's just to the west of the city. If it crosses the mouth of the river, much of the western side of the city may be spared from some significant wind. But that's just something that's details that we're just going to have to iron out over the next day or so. Again, I'm meteorologist Zach Friedel giving you an update on Tropical Storm Nate, which yet again looks like we're going to deal with a hurricane, possibly a Category 1 hurricane, making landfall in the southeastern portion of the state as we go into Saturday night and again into Sunday morning. Everybody have a great night, and I'll have updates sort of as I get them from the officials.